That morning, it took them exactly 3 minutes to erase me from the employee roster. No warning, no thank you. Just an empty email and the averted eyes of people who once called me family. 8 years of loyalty, of staying late to fix their messes, of building strategies that saved them millions, all reduced to a 9-minute meeting in a sterile conference room. They handed me a silence agreement and a month's severance like they were doing me a favor. I signed nothing, walked out with my head high and my rage burning cold. My name is Lena Hartley. And until that morning, I believed loyalty meant something in corporate America. 34 years old, divorced 6 months ago, still paying off a condo in downtown Cleveland that felt too big for one person. I'd given CruxPath Analytics the best years of my life. 8 years of 70-hour weeks, canceled vacations, and relationships that withered because I always put the company first. I wasn't just another analyst. I was the senior strategist who'd saved them from a catastrophic merger in 2021, who'd identified the market patterns that netted them $40 million in unexpected profits last quarter. My algorithms predicted trends 3 months before our competitors even knew to look. But none of that mattered when they decided I was too independent, too willing to question the numbers that didn't add up. The irony wasn't lost on me, a data analyst who couldn't see her own termination coming. Maybe I'd been too focused on the spreadsheets to notice the sideways glances, the meetings that suddenly didn't require my input, the projects reassigned without explanation. Or maybe I'd just been naive enough to think that being indispensable actually made you indispensable. My personal life was already in shambles. The divorce had cleaned out half my savings, leaving me with a mortgage that consumed 60% of my income. My younger brother, Tommy, was halfway through his engineering degree at Case Western, and I'd promised our late mother I'd see him through it. That promise was the only thing that kept me going some days, especially after David left, claiming I loved my job more than our marriage. He wasn't entirely wrong, but CruxPath had been more than a job. It was my identity, my purpose, the place where my obsession with patterns and numbers actually meant something. I'd built their predictive modeling system from scratch, spent countless nights debugging code that would become the backbone of their trading strategies. My colleagues weren't just coworkers, they were the people I'd shared Chinese takeout with at 2 a.m. during product launches, who'd celebrated with me when our department exceeded targets, who'd sent flowers when mom died. That Tuesday started like any other. Coffee at 6:30, emails by 7, first meeting at 8. I was reviewing quarterly projections when the message popped up. Please see HR immediately. No context, no explanation. My stomach dropped. But I told myself it was probably about the new healthcare enrollment, or maybe finally getting approval for the junior analyst I'd been requesting. The walk to HR felt longer than usual. The hallway seemed to stretch, fluorescent lights humming their familiar tune. But something was off. People weren't making eye contact. Conversations stopped when I passed. By the time I reached the conference room, my hands were shaking. Inside, 3 faces waited: HR Director Patricia Nguyen, my boss Marcus Webb, and someone I didn't recognize, a lawyer. Judging by the briefcase and predatory stillness, Patricia's usual smile was nowhere to be found. Marcus studied his phone like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Lena," Patricia began, her voice professionally neutral. "We need to discuss your position." 9 minutes. That's all it took to dismantle 8 years. Words like restructuring and strategic realignment floated past me. Marcus never looked up from his phone. The lawyer slid papers across the table, a separation agreement, a non-disclosure clause, a non-compete that would essentially bar me from working in financial analytics for 2 years. "This is effective immediately," Patricia continued. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items." I found my voice. "Why?" "My performance reviews have been stellar. Last month you said I was integral to—" "The decision has been made." The lawyer interrupted. "We're offering 1 month severance, contingent on signing these agreements." 1 month. For 8 years of my life. For the nights I'd slept on the office couch, the vacations I'd canceled, the marriage I'd let crumble while building their empire. I need time to review these documents, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. We need an answer now. The lawyer pressed. That's when I knew. This wasn't a layoff, it was an execution. Quick, clean, designed to minimize their liability. They wanted me gone before I could ask questions, before I could dig into whatever they were hiding. I stood up, leaving the papers untouched. No. If you don't sign, you forfeit the severance, Patricia warned. Then, I forfeit it. The security guard was already waiting outside, a man I'd shared elevator rides with for years, who now wouldn't meet my eyes. The walk to my desk was a blur. I grabbed my personal laptop, a few framed photos, the coffee mug Tommy had given me that said, "World's Best Sister." Everything else, the projects I'd nurtured, the systems I'd built, the digital architecture of my entire career, stayed behind. As the elevator descended, I watched the floors count down like years of my life being erased. 8, 7, 6. By the time I reached the lobby, I was nobody. Just another discarded employee carrying a cardboard box through the February cold, while somewhere above me, they were already deleting my access codes and reallocating my responsibilities. They'd fired me without notice, without cause, without even the courtesy of a real explanation. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that I never forgot anything, especially numbers that didn't add up. The truth had been staring at me for months, hidden in plain sight like a virus in clean code. I just hadn't wanted to see it. 2 weeks before my termination, I'd stumbled across irregularities in our client reporting system, numbers that shifted between internal and external documents, risk assessments that magically improved right before major investor meetings. At first, I'd assumed they were clerical errors, the kind of mistakes that happen when you're processing millions of data points daily. But patterns don't lie, and these weren't random. The restructuring story was bullshit. I knew it the moment Patricia mentioned it. CruxPath had posted record profits last quarter. We'd just landed 3 major institutional clients. You don't restructure when you're winning, unless you're hiding something. Back in my empty apartment, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and opened my personal laptop. Force of habit made me check my work email. But of course, access denied. They'd been thorough. My company phone was already dead. Corporate credit card canceled. 8 years evaporated in less than an hour. But they'd made one crucial error. In their haste to eliminate me, they'd forgotten that senior strategists have deeper access than most. For 2 years, I'd been backing up my work to a personal encrypted drive, not company data, just my own analysis and code. Legal gray area, perhaps, but I'd needed offline access for those weekend strategy sessions. Hidden in those files was something I'd documented but never reported. Project Meridian. 6 months ago, Marcus had asked me to run predictive models on several mid-sized pension funds. Routine work, except the parameters he'd given me were oddly specific. Model for catastrophic failure, he'd said. Stress test for worst-case scenarios. When I'd delivered the analysis, showing these funds were actually quite stable, he'd seemed disappointed. Asked me to run it again with adjusted variables. I'd refused, told him the data didn't support his assumptions. The meeting ended with him taking the project away, claiming they'd found someone more flexible. Now, sitting in my kitchen with Cleveland's skyline glittering beyond my window, the pieces clicked together. They hadn't been stress testing, they'd been hunting, looking for vulnerable funds they could manipulate, using our analytical weight to influence market perception. Create artificial volatility, short the positions, profit from the chaos. The flexible analyst they'd found was probably sitting at my old desk right now. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through contacts until I found her. Eleanor Kim, a financial journalist who'd interviewed me last year about algorithmic trading. She'd been sharp, asking questions that suggested she understood the darker corners of our industry. My thumb hovered over her number. Whistleblowing meant declaring war. It meant burning every bridge in an industry where everyone knew everyone. It meant they'd come after me with every legal weapon in their arsenal. But then I thought about those pension funds. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, regular people whose retirements were being gambled with by executives who already had more money than they could spend in 5 lifetimes. People like my mother, who'd worked 30 years as a school counselor only to watch her pension shrink in the 2008 collapse. I started typing an email to Eleanor, then stopped. This needed to be smarter, cleaner. One journalist wouldn't be enough. Not against Cruxpath's legal team. I needed something more. That's when I remembered the meeting from 3 years ago. A compliance audit that had gone deeper than usual. The lead investigator, a woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical smile, had pulled me aside after reviewing our systems. "Your models are impressive," she'd said. "Almost too honest for this industry." She'd handed me a business card. "If you ever see something that doesn't add up, something that could hurt innocent people, call me, day or night." I'd tucked that card away and forgotten about it. Now I ransacked my home office, searching through old files and forgotten drawers until I found it. Creased, but still readable. Maureen K., Vail Federal Business Integrity Office. Senior investigator on the back. She'd written a number in pen. I stared at that card for a long moment. Calling her meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. It meant admitting that the company I devoted 8 years to wasn't just flawed, but potentially criminal. It meant accepting that my entire career had been built on a foundation of lies. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Lena, it's Marcus. I know today was hard. Let's talk tomorrow about possibilities. Some decisions can be reconsidered." Reconsidered? Right. They'd realized their mistake, not in firing me, but in how they'd done it. Too abrupt, too suspicious. Now they wanted to smooth things over, probably offer me a consulting contract with enough zeros to buy my silence. Another text. "The team misses you already. Don't make any rash decisions." Rash decisions? Like reporting financial fraud to federal investigators. I looked at the card again, then at my laptop where months of documented irregularities waited. They thought they'd neutralized a threat by firing me. They thought I'd slink away quietly, grateful for whatever scraps they offered. They thought wrong. I'd given Cruxpath 8 years of loyalty, and they'd repaid it with a 9-minute execution. They'd made me disappear from their org chart, their systems, their carefully crafted corporate narrative. But they'd forgotten one thing. In a world built on data, the person who understands the patterns holds the power. And I understood their patterns better than anyone. The card felt heavy in my hand, weighted with possibility and consequence. One phone call, and everything would change. One phone call, and their house of cards would start to wobble. I thought about the security guard who couldn't meet my eyes. Patricia's professional mask slipping for just a moment. Marcus, hiding behind his phone rather than face what they were doing. They all knew. On some level, they all knew this was wrong. I picked up my phone and started dialing. 3 rings, then a voice, crisp and alert despite the late hour. "Vail." "Ms. Vail, this is Lena Hartley. We met 3 years ago during the Cruxpath audit. You gave me your card." A pause. "I remember you, the analyst with the elegant algorithms. I'm calling because..." I took a breath. "Because the patterns don't add up anymore. And I think people are going to get hurt. Are you somewhere secure?" The question sent chills down my spine. "My apartment." "Good. Don't put anything in writing yet. Don't contact anyone else. Can you meet tomorrow morning?" "Early?" "Yes." Cleveland Convention Center, parking level B3, northwest corner, 6 a.m. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, card still in my hand, and realized I'd just lit a fuse. How long it was, where it led, I couldn't know. But one thing was certain. Cruxpath thought they'd ended my story with that 9-minute meeting. They were wrong. It was just beginning. I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew I'd crossed a line. At 3 a.m., I gave up and made coffee, staring at the city lights while my mind raced through possibilities. The meeting was in 3 hours. 3 hours until I potentially destroyed everything I'd built. My laptop sat closed on the kitchen counter. Inside were the files I'd accumulated, not stolen data, but my own analysis of patterns I'd observed. Legal, technically. Damning. Absolutely. I opened an old filing cabinet, searching for something I'd almost forgotten existed. There, beneath tax returns and old lease agreements, was a manila folder labeled simply Insurance. Not insurance in the traditional sense. This was my protection against a day I'd hoped would never come. 5 years ago, before Cruxpath, I'd worked for a smaller firm that had collapsed in a scandal. I'd been the one to spot the fraud, to report it. The experience had taught me 2 things: always document everything, and never trust anyone completely. The folder contained printed emails, meeting notes, things that seemed innocuous at the time, but took on new meaning now. Marcus asking me to adjust risk assessments. The CFO wondering if we could reframe certain projections. Senior management pushing for analysis that supported predetermined conclusions rather than following where the data led. But the real treasure was a USB drive taped inside the folder. My black box, a record of every model I'd built, every analysis I'd run, with timestamps and version histories. If Cruxpath tried to claim I'd fabricated evidence, this would prove otherwise. At 5:15, I dressed carefully. Professional but forgettable, navy blazer, dark jeans, the kind of outfit that wouldn't stand out on security cameras. I transferred the most critical files to a new encrypted drive, left the original hidden in my apartment. If something went wrong, at least the evidence would survive. The drive to the convention center was surreal. Cleveland at dawn, empty streets and dim streetlights. The city holding its breath. I parked on level B2 and walked down to B3, my footsteps echoing in the concrete cavern. Maureen Vale was already there, leaning against a black sedan that screamed government vehicle. She looked exactly as I remembered, mid-50s, steel gray hair pulled back, eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Hartley. She didn't extend her hand. Are you certain you want to do this? They fired me yesterday, 9 minutes, no explanation. That's not what I asked. I met her gaze. Yes, I'm certain. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Get in. Inside the car, she activated what looked like a white noise generator. Paranoid? Maybe. But you'd be surprised what people can do with parabolic microphones these days. Is Cruxpath under investigation? I can't discuss ongoing investigations. What I can tell you is that your call wasn't entirely unexpected. Your former employer has been on our radar for some time, but radar isn't evidence. I pulled out the encrypted drive. This might help. She didn't take it. Before we go any further, I need you to understand what you're doing. This isn't just about losing your job or even your career. If Cruxpath is doing what we suspect, they have significant resources and connections. They will try to destroy you, financially, professionally, personally. They already destroyed me professionally. No, her voice was sharp. They fired you. That's kindergarten compared to what comes next. Lawsuits designed to bankrupt you. Private investigators digging through your life. Every mistake you've ever made splashed across financial blogs. They'll claim you're a disgruntled employee, mentally unstable, trying to extort them. They'll make you unemployable in any industry that touches finance. My hands were steady, but my heart raced. And if I walk away? Then you rebuild your life somewhere else. Take the severance if they offer it again. Sign their papers. Disappear quietly. What about the pension funds? The people who'll lose their retirements? She was quiet for a moment. That's the question, isn't it? Can you live with knowing what you know and doing nothing? I thought about my mother, how she'd scrimp and save, checking her pension statements like they were holy scripture, how she'd cried when the 2008 crash cut her retirement by 40%. She'd worked until she was 70. Body failing, but bills still coming. No, I said, I can't. Maureen finally took the drive. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning, every detail, every conversation, every suspicious request. And Ms. Hartley, once we start this, there's no stopping. You understand? I understood. In that moment, sitting in a government sedan in a parking garage at dawn, I understood perfectly. They'd fired me without notice, thought they could erase me like a line of bad code. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just a data analyst. I was a woman who'd watched her mother work herself to death because someone in a boardroom decided her pension was worth gambling with. I was someone who understood that behind every spreadsheet were real people with real lives. 3 years ago, I began. Marcus Webb asked me to create a modeling system for identifying market vulnerabilities. For the next 2 hours, I talked, every detail, every pattern, every moment when I'd been asked to look the other way. Maureen recorded everything, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly just listening. When I finished, dawn was breaking over Lake Erie, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Maureen turned off the recorder. "This is significant," she said carefully. "But we'll need more. The analysis on this drive. Can you walk me through it? Help us understand what we're looking at." Yes. It could take months. During that time, you'll need to maintain absolute discretion. No contact with former colleagues, no posting on social media, nothing that suggests you're cooperating with us. I understand. We can offer some protection, but it's limited. A dedicated phone line, regular check-ins. If you feel threatened, you call immediately. She handed me a new phone. Basic model, no smart features. "This is your lifeline. My number is the only one programmed." I took it, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to represent such a massive decision. "One more thing," Maureen said. "That call from your former boss last night? There will be more. They'll offer you money, positions. Whatever they think will buy your silence, you need to be prepared." "I won't." "I'm not questioning your resolve. I'm telling you they're going to get creative. They might threaten your brother's education, your mortgage, things you care about. They play dirty when cornered." The reality of it settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just about me anymore. What do I do now? Go home, live your life as normally as possible. Look for new employment. It would seem suspicious if you didn't. If they contact you, be polite but firm. Don't antagonize them, but don't agree to anything. And Ms. Hartley? Yes? That folder you mentioned, your insurance, make copies, store them separately. What you know is valuable, but only if it survives. She drove me back to my car. As I got out, she called after me. "Lena, you're doing the right thing. Remember that when it gets hard." I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. As I drove home, the city waking up around me, I thought about the phone in my pocket. One number, one lifeline, one chance to make things right. They'd fired me without notice. Now I was returning the favor. The data was beautiful in its precision, horrifying in its implications. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment, surviving on coffee and takeout, building a case that would be undeniable, not just hunches or suspicious patterns, forensic financial analysis that would stand up in court. The scheme was elegantly vicious. Cruxpath had identified 17 pension funds across the Midwest, all managing retirements for public sector workers. Using their position as a trusted analytical partner, they'd been releasing carefully crafted reports suggesting these funds were over-leveraged, vulnerable to market corrections. Nothing overt, just enough doubt to spook institutional investors. Then came Phase 2. Anonymous tips to financial bloggers, leaked concerns from unnamed analysts. An orchestrated whisper campaign designed to create artificial volatility. As share prices dipped, Cruxpath's trading arm, supposedly firewalled from the analytical division, would short the positions. The final phase was the cruelest. Once they'd profited from the decline, they'd release updated analysis showing the funds were actually stable, allowing them to close their short positions as prices recovered. The pension funds survived, barely, but weakened. The retirees depending on them would feel the squeeze for decades. Total profit to Cruxpath? approximately $347 million over 18 months. Total damage to retirement savings, nearly $2 billion. I documented everything, every trade, every report, every correlation between analytical releases and market movements. The pattern was clear once you knew where to look. They'd hidden it well, using shell companies and offshore accounts. But data doesn't lie. It only whispers the truth to those who know how to listen. On the fourth day, my regular phone rang. Marcus. Lena, we need to talk. We're talking in person. There's been a misunderstanding. The board wants to discuss a new position, Chief Data Ethics Officer. It's a role we've realized we desperately need. Chief Data Ethics Officer. They couldn't have been more transparent if they'd offered me a position as Vice President of Keeping Quiet. I'm not interested. The salary is substantial, 7 figures, plus bonuses. 7 figures. More than I'd make in a decade at my old position. Enough to pay off the condo. Secure Tommy's future. Never worry about money again. I said I'm not interested. His voice hardened. Lena, be smart. This is a generous offer. More generous than you'll find anywhere else in the industry. There it was, the threat wrapped in silk. Take our money or we'll make sure no one else offers you any. Goodbye, Marcus. I hung up and immediately called Maureen on the secure phone. They're escalating, she said after I filled her in. That's good, means they're scared. Can you send me what you've compiled? I'd already prepared it. Encrypted files containing my complete analysis, cross-referenced and annotated. A roadmap to their crimes that any competent investigator could follow. Sending now, I said, initiating the secure transfer Maureen had taught me. Excellent, Lena. We're moving this to the next level. Federal prosecutors are interested, very interested, but I need to warn you, once we go official, your name will eventually come out. Whistleblower protections only go so far. I know. Your brother, is he secure? The question chilled me. Should he not be? Precaution only, but maybe have him stay with friends for a while. Vary his routines. I called Tommy that night, trying to keep my voice casual as I suggested he crash at his boyfriend's place for a few weeks. He was too smart not to notice something was wrong, but he didn't push. That's what I loved about him. He trusted me to tell him when I was ready. The next morning, my laptop screen flickered and died. Then my personal desktop, then my tablet. All within 10 minutes. Not a power surge, surgical strikes against my digital life. I grabbed the secure phone, but Maureen was already calling me. They're moving, she said. Our cyber team detected intrusion attempts on your devices. Did you lose anything critical? No. Thank God for offline backups. Everything important is secured. Good. Listen carefully. In approximately 2 hours, federal agents will execute search warrants at Cruxpath's offices. We need you to stay put, doors locked until I call. Can you do that? Yes. Lena. They know it was you. Someone leaked, I don't know who or how, but they know. If anyone shows up at your door, anyone, you call 911 first, then me. Understood? Understood. I spent the next 2 hours pacing my apartment, watching the clock, jumping at every sound. At 10:47 a.m., my regular phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues, reporters, numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer any of them. At 11:15, Maureen called. It's done. 15 locations raided simultaneously, servers seized, documents confiscated, several executives in custody. Marcus, CFO Walter Brennan and Head of Trading Jessica Liu. Marcus Webb is missing. Missing. Of course he was. What happens now? Now the real work begins. FBI forensic accountants will verify your analysis. Prosecutors will build cases. And Lena. The media will be all over this by evening. You need to be prepared. She was right. By 6 p.m., it was the lead story on every financial news outlet. Breaking. Federal raids on CruxPath Analytics. Pension fund manipulation scheme exposed. Whistleblower reveals systematic fraud. They didn't name me, but anyone at CruxPath could do the math. Senior analyst, recently terminated, specialized in predictive modeling. It wasn't exactly a long list. My secure phone rang. Maureen again. Pack a bag, she said. We're moving you to a safe location for a few days. Precautionary. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, my regular phone rang one more time. A number I recognized but hadn't seen in years. Patricia Nguyen, the HR director who'd fired me. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lena. Her voice was small, scared. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what they were doing. They told me you were a security risk, that you'd been accessing classified data. I thought, Patricia, I have a daughter. She's 7. Her college fund is in one of those pension accounts they targeted. I wanted you to know. Not everyone knew. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, feeling something I hadn't expected. Pity. How many others at CruxPath were like Patricia, following orders without understanding the bigger picture? But then I thought about those 17 pension funds. About the teachers and firefighters and public servants who'd spend their retirements counting pennies because someone wanted a bigger bonus. They'd fired me without notice, turned my life upside down in 9 minutes. Now their entire house of cards was collapsing. And I'd lit the match with a single phone call. The secure phone buzzed. A text from Maureen. Car outside. Time to go. I took one last look around my apartment, at the life I'd built, and was now leaving behind. Then I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. The data had set me free. Now it was time to see who else it would liberate, or bury. The safe house was a modest apartment in Lakewood, 15 minutes from downtown but a world away from my life. For 3 days, I watched my former employer implode on live television. The revelations came in waves. First, the pension fund manipulation scheme, exactly as I documented. Then, deeper corruption, bribery of rating agencies, blackmail of regulators, a web of financial crime that made my discoveries look like the tip of the iceberg. Walter Brennan, the CFO, cracked first. Facing 40 years in federal prison, he sang like a canary with its tail on fire. Jessica Liu held out for exactly 1 day before her lawyer negotiated a plea deal. The dominoes fell fast after that, but Marcus Webb remained missing. On the 4th day, Maureen arrived with a stack of newspapers and a grim expression. You're famous, she said, tossing the Wall Street Journal on the table. Front page, the analyst who brought down CruxPath. They'd found my name. Of course they had. Someone, probably a former colleague looking for their 15 minutes, had leaked it. My LinkedIn photo stared back at me from the business section of every major newspaper. Is this good or bad? I asked. Both. You're untouchable now, too public for anyone to harm without drawing massive scrutiny. But your old life? That's over. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Job offers, interview requests, book deals, movie producers. Everyone wanted a piece of the woman who'd toppled a financial giant with one phone call. As the headlines breathlessly proclaimed, "There's something else," Maureen continued. CruxPath's board is in full damage control. They're claiming you were a rogue employee who was terminated for cause, that you fabricated evidence out of revenge. That's bullshit? Yes. But they have expensive lawyers and a PR firm that specializes in corporate crisis management. They're going to try to destroy your credibility. Let them try. The data speaks for itself. About that, she pulled out a tablet. Our forensic team has been going through CruxPath's servers. Your analysis was conservative. The actual fraud is closer to $500 million. And Lena. We found something else. She showed me an email chain from 2 years ago. Marcus Webb discussing the Hartley problem with senior management. They'd known for years that I was too ethical, too meticulous. They'd kept me around because my work was brilliant, but they'd always planned to eliminate me when I became inconvenient. They were going to frame you, Maureen said. Plant evidence of insider trading. Make it look like you were the corrupt one. Your termination was just phase 1. My hands shook as I read the emails. They'd planned to destroy not just my career, but my freedom. If I hadn't called Maureen, I'd probably be in custody right now, fighting fabricated charges while they covered their tracks. We need to go public with this, I said. We will. But first, I have an offer for you. From my superiors. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job offer from the Federal Business Integrity Office, Senior Investigative Analyst, specializing in financial crimes. The salary was less than Cruxpath had paid. But the mission was clear. Use my skills to catch others like them. You want me to switch sides permanently? We want you to do what you do best. Find patterns others miss. But this time, for the good guys. Before I could respond, the secure phone rang. Unknown number. Don't answer that, Maureen warned, but something made me pick up. Hello, Lena. Marcus, his voice was calm, eerily so. I'm disappointed in you, he continued. We could have made you rich, set you up for life. All you had to do was play along. Where are you, Marcus? Somewhere with no extradition treaty. Don't worry, I'm not coming back. But I wanted you to know something. You think you won? You cost good people their jobs. Carol in accounting, mother of 3. Jim in IT, 6 months from retirement. They had nothing to do with this, but they're suffering because of your righteousness. You cost 17 pension funds. Spare me the morality play. This is finance. Everyone's dirty. You just decided to pretend otherwise. Is that all? A pause. Actually, no. Check your brother's student account. Consider it a parting gift. The line went dead. My blood turned to ice. Maureen! She was already on her phone, barking orders. Within minutes, we had answers. Someone had deposited $50,000 into Tommy's student account from an offshore shell company, the same account pattern used in the pension fund scheme. They're trying to implicate him, Maureen said. Make it look like your family profited from insider knowledge. Can you stop it? Already frozen. We'll trace it back, prove it was planted. But Lena, this is what I warned you about. They're going to keep coming at you, finding new angles. I stared at the job offer. Taking it meant this would be my life. Constantly fighting people like Marcus, always watching my back, never fully safe. Not taking it meant letting them win. When do I start? I asked. Maureen smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Monday. But first, we have a press conference tomorrow. Time to tell your side of the story. That night, I called Tommy from a secure line, told him everything. He listened in silence, then said, Mom would be proud of you. Mom would have told me to take the 7 figures and run. No, he said firmly. Mom would have done exactly what you did. That's where you got it from. The next morning, I stood before a room full of reporters. Cameras flashed, questions flew. I answered them all, calmly laying out the truth. How Cruxpath had systematically defrauded pension funds. How they'd tried to silence me. How one phone call had started an avalanche. The headlines that evening were even bigger than before. Cruxpath's stock price hit 0. Trading suspended permanently. Criminal charges filed against 23 executives and traders. But the best moment came when Patricia Nguyen appeared on CNN, corroborating my story. Then another whistleblower came forward, then another. By week's end, 17 Cruxpath employees had provided evidence to federal investigators. Marcus had been wrong. Not everyone was dirty. Some people just needed someone to go first, to show them it was possible to stand up to corruption. They'd fired me without notice, thinking they could erase me like a glitch in their system. Instead, I'd become the virus that brought down their entire network. And I was just getting started. 3 months later, the dust had settled into a new reality. Cruxpath Analytics no longer existed, its assets liquidated, its offices empty, its name synonymous with corporate greed. The trials were ongoing, but convictions seemed certain. Walter Brennan had agreed to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jessica Liu faced 15 years minimum. 21 others awaited their day in court. Marcus Webb remained at large, though Interpol had frozen his assets. Wherever he was hiding, he was doing it on a budget. I'd started my position at the Federal Business Integrity Office, working out of a nondescript building in downtown Cleveland. My desk was smaller than my old one. The coffee was terrible, and the pay was 30% less. I'd never been happier. The work was different, but familiar. Same skills, different purpose. Instead of building models to maximize profit, I hunted for patterns that revealed crime. In my first month alone, I'd identified suspicious trading patterns at 2 major firms. Both were now under investigation. But the offers kept coming. That morning, 3 envelopes waited on my desk. I didn't need to open them to know what they contained. Headhunters had been circling since the press conference, each convinced they could lure me back to the private sector. Prestigious hedge fund, Maureen said, glancing at the return addresses. Investment bank, and, oh, this one's creative. Ethical Analytics Consulting. They're really trying. The answer's still no. The hedge fund is offering $3 million base, plus bonuses. The answer's still no. She studied me. You know you don't have to prove anything anymore, right? You brought down Cruxpath. You could take one of these jobs, make your fortune, live comfortably. Comfortably. I turned the word over. My mother lived comfortably until her pension got cut. Those 17 funds were managing comfortable retirements for thousands of people. I'm not arguing. Just making sure you're here because you want to be, not because you feel obligated. I thought about it. The truth was, I'd had a moment of temptation with each offer. $3 million would solve every financial worry I'd ever have. But then I'd remember that 9-minute meeting. The security guard who couldn't meet my eyes. Patricia's shaking voice as she followed orders she didn't understand. I'm exactly where I need to be, I said. That afternoon, I was deep in analysis of trading patterns at a Chicago firm when my personal phone rang. Cleveland area code, unfamiliar number. Lena Hartley. Yes? My name is David Park. I'm the interim CEO of what used to be Cruxpath Analytics. I was wondering if we could meet. I don't think that's appropriate. Please, not about a job or anything like that. It's about the employees. The ones who weren't involved but lost everything when we collapsed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Ohio City. David Park was younger than I'd expected, early 40s, with the exhausted look of someone trying to clean up a disaster they didn't create. I was brought in by the bankruptcy court, he explained. My job is to salvage what value remains, distribute it to creditors. But I'm also trying to help the innocent employees, the ones like you who just came to work and did their jobs honestly. What do you want from me? Your validation, honestly. I'm creating a fund from the executive bonuses we've clawed back. It won't replace their lost jobs, but it might help with transitions. I want to make sure it goes to the right people, the ones who really didn't know. He showed me a list. Carol from accounting was there, and Jim from IT. Also Patricia Nguyen and dozens of others, people who'd been cogs in a corrupt machine without realizing it. Patricia knew something was wrong when she fired me, I pointed out. She followed orders she didn't understand. That's different from actively participating in fraud. She's been helpful to investigators, provided evidence about how management compartmentalized information. I reviewed the list, suggested a few additions. Junior analysts who'd been kept in the dark, support staff who'd never had access to the real numbers. Can I ask you something? David said as we finished. Do you regret it? Bringing down the company? I didn't bring down anything. They brought themselves down. I just turned on the lights. Still, your former colleagues, even the innocent ones, some of them blame you. I know. I'd seen the social media posts, the angry emails that found their way to my inbox. But blame doesn't change the truth. Cruxpath was a cancer. Sometimes you have to cut out healthy tissue to save the patient. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. The pension funds have already recovered most of their losses thanks to the asset seizures. Thousands of retirements were saved. As I walked back to my office, I thought about the strange turns life takes. 6 months ago, I'd been a senior analyst at a prestigious firm, building wealth for the wealthy. Now I was a government investigator making less money but doing work that mattered. My phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. Hope you're happy. I deleted it without reading further. There would always be people who blamed the messenger instead of the message, who focused on their personal loss rather than the systemic corruption that necessitated it. That evening, I met Tommy for dinner. He was doing well, his final year of engineering school funded by scholarships and my help. Clean money, honestly earned. Any regrets? He asked, echoing David Park's question. No, I said, and meant it. They fired me without notice. Turns out it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because you got to bring them down. Because I got to find out who I really am. Not a corporate analyst willing to look the other way. Not someone who could be bought with a big enough number. Just someone who sees patterns and isn't afraid to point them out. Even when it costs you everything? Especially then. We finished dinner talking about his graduation plans, his job prospects, normal things. But I caught him looking at me with something like pride. His big sister. The woman who'd given up millions to do the right thing. They'd fired me without notice, thinking they were ending my story. Instead, they'd helped me find my purpose. And that was worth more than all the job offers in the world. A year later, on a cold February evening, I found myself walking past the building that once housed CruxPath Analytics. The company logo had been removed months ago, leaving only ghostly outlines on the granite facade. The floors that had buzzed with activity now stood dark, empty windows reflecting the streetlights like hollow eyes. I stopped on the sidewalk, remembering that morning when I'd walked out carrying a cardboard box, my 8-year career reduced to a few personal items. The security guard who'd escorted me out probably didn't even remember my face. The building had been sold to a tech startup, something about sustainable energy solutions. Clean money for a clean start. I liked the poetry of it. Lena. I turned. Patricia Nguyen stood behind me, wrapped in a winter coat, looking healthier than she had during our CruxPath days. Patricia? How are you? Better. I'm working for a nonprofit now, financial literacy programs for underserved communities. The pay is... She laughed. Well, it's nonprofit pay. But I sleep at night. That's worth something. It's worth everything. She paused, studying the empty building. Do you ever come here? First time since that day. I come sometimes. To remind myself. She pulled her coat tighter. I owe you an apology. A real one. I knew something was wrong when they told me to fire you. The reasons didn't make sense. But I was scared. Mortgage, daughter's medical bills, you know the trap. We all have our reasons. No. Her voice was firm. Some reasons are better than others. You had every reason to take their money and stay quiet. Your divorce, your brother's education, your own financial pressures. But you didn't. We stood in silence, watching our breath cloud in the cold air. They offered me 22 times, I said quietly. 22 different calls, each with a bigger number. The last one was $8 million and a written guarantee of no legal action. Patricia's eyes widened. $8 million. Marcus called it my retirement package. All I had to do was sign a statement saying I'd misunderstood the data, that my accusations were based on incomplete information. But you didn't. No. Because I kept thinking about all the people who would sign, who'd take the money and let the corruption continue. And I realized, if everyone takes the money, nothing ever changes. Where is he now? Marcus? Still running. Last I heard, he was spotted in Montenegro, living off whatever he managed to hide before his assets were frozen, paranoid, isolated, checking over his shoulder every day. I smiled grimly. He's in a prison of his own making. Patricia nodded. The others, most of them took plea deals. Walter Brennan got 7 years. Jessica Liu, 10. The rest, varying sentences, some are already out, trying to rebuild. And you, what's next? I'm actually teaching now, part-time at the community college, business ethics, using Crux Path as a case study. What happens when good people enable bad systems? We exchange contact information, promised to get coffee sometime, both of us knowing we probably wouldn't, but appreciating the gesture anyway. As she walked away, I took one last look at the building. Somewhere up there was the conference room where they'd fired me in 9 minutes. The office where I'd spent countless nights building models that made rich people richer. The desk where I'd ignored my conscience for too long. If they'd said thank you, I whispered to the empty windows. If they'd shown even a moment of gratitude for 8 years of my life. But they hadn't. They'd treated me like a liability to be eliminated, a problem to be solved. They'd thought their money and power made them untouchable. They'd been wrong. I turned and walked away, leaving the ghost of Crux Path behind. My phone buzzed. Maureen. With a new case. Another pattern to uncover. Another corruption to expose. The work never ended. But that was okay. Someone had to do it. Someone had to be the person who couldn't be bought. As I headed back to my car, I thought about the journey from that morning to now. They'd fired me without notice, but in doing so, they'd created their own destroyer. They'd taken away my job but given me a mission. They'd tried to silence me but had instead given me a voice that echoed through federal courtrooms and newspaper headlines. The streetlights flickered on as darkness fell over Cleveland. Somewhere in the city, former Crux Path employees were rebuilding their lives. Some still cursed my name. Others, like Patricia, had found new purpose in the wreckage. And somewhere across an ocean, Marcus Webb was learning what it meant to truly lose everything, not in 9 minutes like I had, but slowly, irreversibly, one frozen account and sleepless night at a time. They'd fired me without notice. I'd returned the favor with compound interest. My phone rang again. Another case, another pattern waiting to be discovered. I answered it with the same words I'd used that night when I first called Maureen. The patterns don't add up, and I think people are going to get hurt. Then let's make sure they don't, came the reply. I smiled, walking into the night. This was my life now. Less money, more meaning, fewer colleagues, more purpose. No longer building wealth for the wealthy, but protecting the vulnerable from those who would prey on them. They'd fired me without notice, thinking they were ending my story. Instead, they'd written the first chapter of something much bigger. And I was just getting started. Thank you for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Please share in the comments below so we can connect with fellow listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Lena's position? Would you have taken the $8 million and walked away? Or stood your ground like she did? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.